Veteran single dad felt invisible until a young SEAL saw his tattoo and froze. In that instant, the whole diner realized this quiet old man carried a secret that could shatter everything they thought they knew. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun crept through thin curtains, casting pale strips of light across Jack Turner's weathered face. His eyes opened slowly, greeting another solitary day. The same routine, the same silence, the same emptiness that had become his constant companion since Martha passed 5 years ago. Jack's joints creaked as he swung his legs over the side of the bed. 72 years had left their mark, each movement a reminder of time's relentless march. The hardwood floor felt cool beneath his feet as he shuffled toward the kitchen, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house. The coffee maker, an old but reliable friend, gurgled to life with the press of a button. While it brewed, Jack's gaze drifted to the framed photograph on the counter. Martha's smile, frozen in time, seemed to glow in the morning light. Her eyes still sparkled with the same warmth they had when they first met, back when the world felt full of promise. "Morning, sweetheart," he whispered, his daily ritual unchanged after all these years. The house answered with silence. The rich aroma of coffee filled the kitchen. Jack poured himself a cup, black and strong, just as he'd learned to drink it in Vietnam. Some habits never changed, even after all these decades. He settled into his favorite chair by the window, the leather worn smooth from years of use. The morning paper waited on his front porch, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the heavy southern dew. Jack retrieved it, noticing how his neighbor Mrs. Patterson quickly looked away when he glanced in her direction. She used to bring over pies and stop to chat back when Martha was alive. Now she hurried inside, like most folks did these days. Back in his chair, Jack sorted through the mail that had arrived yesterday. Bills, mostly. A furniture catalog he hadn't subscribed to. A letter asking him to donate to some charity. Nothing from Sarah, his daughter. The last time she called was... He had to think about it. 3 weeks ago? Maybe 4? He understood she was busy with her life up in Michigan. 2 kids in college now, a demanding job as a hospital administrator. But understanding didn't make the silence any easier to bear. The morning stretched on, quiet and predictable. Jack showered, dressed in clean khakis and a short-sleeve button-down shirt, and made his bed with military precision. Hospital corners just as sharp as they'd been in his Navy days. Old habits die hard, especially the good ones. He spent the afternoon puttering in his small garden, though the summer heat made it tough to stay out for long. The tomatoes needed staking, and the herbs Martha had planted years ago still flourished, though he rarely used them anymore. Cooking for one had never seemed worth the effort. As evening approached, the familiar hunger pangs reminded him it was time for dinner. Jack could have heated up a TV dinner or opened a can of soup, but the thought of another meal alone in his quiet house made his chest ache. Instead, he grabbed his keys and headed to the Starlight Diner. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, but nobody looked up. The usual crowd was there, families with children, couples sharing dessert, teenagers huddled in booths. Jack made his way to his regular spot at the counter, nodding to Betty, the waitress who'd worked there as long as he could remember. "The usual, Mr. Turner?" she asked, already reaching for the coffee pot. "Please," he replied, though she'd already turned away to help another customer. The diner's ancient ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, fighting a losing battle against the sticky southern evening. Jack rolled up his sleeves, revealing the faded tattoo on his forearm, the Navy SEAL emblem he'd gotten after completing training. The ink had blurred over the decades, but the frogman skeleton was still clearly visible, a reminder of who he'd been, what he'd done. The meatloaf special arrived without ceremony. Jack cut into it methodically, barely tasting the food as the conversations of strangers washed over him. A young couple argued about bills. A grandmother fussed over her grandchildren's table manners. A group of teenagers laughed at some shared joke. He was just about to ask for his check when something changed in the atmosphere of the diner. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, an old instinct he hadn't felt in years. Jack looked up from his plate to find a young man in military fatigues frozen mid-step, staring at his arm with an expression of disbelief. The soldier's mouth opened slightly, his coffee cup hovering inches above its saucer. His eyes were fixed on Jack's tattoo, and in them, Jack saw something he hadn't seen reflected in another person's gaze for a very long time. Recognition. The young soldier rose from his booth, his movements careful and deliberate. His pressed uniform and straight posture marked him as military, but there was something more in his bearing, a quiet intensity that Jack recognized from his own days in service. The soldier's eyes remained fixed on Jack's exposed forearm, where the faded ink of the SEAL Team Frogman still showed clearly against his weathered skin. "Where did you serve, sir?" The soldier's voice came out barely above a whisper, but in the suddenly quiet diner it carried like a thunderclap. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Sally, the waitress who'd been bringing Jack his coffee for the past decade, paused with her pot suspended in mid-air. Jack felt the weight of every eye in the place turned toward him. His throat tightened. It had been years since anyone had asked about his service. Decades of blending into the background made this sudden attention feel almost uncomfortable. He cleared his throat, his voice rough with disuse. "Vietnam. SEAL Team 2. The young soldier's eyes widened. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet, pulling out a worn photograph. "Sir, my name is Michael Carter. I think you knew my father. James Carter?" Jack's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. The name hit him like a physical blow, stirring memories he'd locked away long ago. "Jimmy Carter?" His voice cracked. "Your father was Jimmy?" Michael nodded, carefully placing the photograph on Jack's table. It showed a much younger version of Jack, arm thrown around the shoulders of a grinning sailor with Michael's same strong jaw and determined eyes. "This was taken right after the mission in '71. The one where your father took a bullet meant for me," Jack finished quietly. His fingers traced the edge of the photograph, memories flooding back. The jungle heat, the sound of gunfire, Jimmy pushing him out of the way at the last second. "Yes, sir." Michael's voice grew stronger. "Dad survived because you carried him 3 miles through enemy territory to the extraction point. He used to tell me that story every birthday. Said it wasn't just about you saving his life. It was about never leaving a brother behind." The diner had gone completely still. Jack could feel the other customers leaning in, hanging on every word. Sally had given up any pretense of working and stood openly watching, coffee pot forgotten in her hand. "Your father was one of the bravest men I ever knew," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "He saved my life that day just as much as I saved his. I lost track of him after we came home. I didn't know he had. He passed away 3 years ago," Michael said softly. "Cancer. But he never forgot you, sir. He named me Michael Jack Carter, after you." Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in Jack's chest. All these years of feeling invisible, forgotten, and here was living proof that his actions had mattered, that someone had remembered. Would you mind if I joined you, sir?" Michael gestured to the empty seat across from Jack. "I'd love to hear about that mission from your perspective. Dad always said you were the real hero that day, though you'd never admit it." Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As Michael sat down, Jack noticed other diners smiling at him, nodding with respect. Sally appeared with fresh coffee for them both, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "On the house," she said, squeezing Jack's shoulder. "For both of you." For the next hour, Jack found himself talking more than he had in years. The words came slowly at first, then faster as the memories surfaced. He told Michael about the mission, about his father's quick thinking and courage under fire, about the brotherhood that bound them all together in those dangerous days. Other customers lingered over their meals, openly listening. Some asked respectful questions about his service. A Vietnam-era Army veteran from 2 tables over came to shake his hand, calling him brother. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly seen. When the evening finally wound down, Jack stepped out into the cool night air. The streets of the small town seemed different somehow, not quite as lonely as they had before. His steps were lighter as he walked home, his mind turning over the evening's events. The stars winked overhead, bright and clear in the southern sky. Jack found himself looking up at them, remembering nights in the jungle when those same stars had guided them home. He thought about Jimmy Carter, about the son who carried his name, about the strange ways life had of bringing things full circle. For the first time in years, the silence of his solitary walk didn't feel like a burden. Instead, it felt full of possibility, charged with the unexpected warmth of being remembered, of mattering to someone, of being seen. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jack's front porch as he settled into his usual wooden rocking chair. The day promised to be another hot one, typical for this time of year in their small southern town. He watched the neighborhood cats prowl through the overgrown grass of his yard, hunting for breakfast in the early light. A black pickup truck slowed to a stop in front of his house. Jack straightened in his chair, recognizing the young soldier from the diner. Michael stepped out, carrying 2 paper cups from the local coffee shop. "Good morning, sir," Michael called out, climbing the creaky steps. "Hope I'm not disturbing you too early." Jack waved away the concern. "Been up since dawn. Military habits die hard." Michael smiled, extending one of the cups. "Black coffee, if that's all right. Figured a SEAL wouldn't want any of that fancy stuff they serve nowadays." "You figured right." Jack accepted the cup, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "Have a seat, son." Michael settled into the chair, his pressed uniform a stark contrast to Jack's worn flannel shirt and jeans. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the neighborhood wake up. "My father," Michael began, his voice soft with reverence. "He used to tell me stories about you, about that night in '72, near the DMZ. Jack's weathered hands tightened around his cup. "Your father was Bob Carter?" "Yes, sir. Robert Carter, Jr. But everyone called him Bob." Michael turned to face Jack. "He never forgot what you did. Said he wouldn't have made it home if it wasn't for you." The memory surfaced like an old photograph. Moonless night, jungle thick as soup, enemy fire cutting through the darkness. Jack pushed it back down. "Your father was a good man, one of the best I served with. He passed away 5 years ago," Michael said, his voice catching slightly. "Cancer. But he made me promise something before he went. Said, if you ever meet Turner, you honor him. Never thought I'd get the chance, to be honest." Jack studied the young man's face, seeing echoes of his old friend Bob. "You followed in his footsteps, I see. SEAL team?" "Team 3, sir. Just got back from my 3rd deployment." Michael set his coffee down. "Dad would have been proud, I think, though these days." He trailed off, looking out at the street. "Something troubling you, son?" Michael rubbed his neck. "It's my little girl, Lily. She's 7 now, her mother." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She left when Lily was 2. Couldn't handle the military life," she said. "Now with deployments, it's been rough on Lily. My sister helps when she can, but—" Jack nodded, understanding the weight of single parenthood. "It's not easy, raising a child alone." "No, sir, it's not." Michael's face softened when he mentioned his daughter. "Lily's amazing, though. Smart as a whip, brave as they come. Reminds me of Dad sometimes, the way she faces things head on." The morning had warmed considerably, and Jack rolled up his sleeves out of habit. The faded SEAL tattoo caught Michael's eye again. "Dad had the same one," Michael said. "Used to tell me it wasn't just a mark on his skin, it was a promise. A promise to never leave a brother behind, to always stand for something bigger than yourself." Jack traced the familiar outline with his finger. "Your father understood what it meant. Not everyone did, back then or now." He made sure I understood too. Michael straightened in his chair. "Sir, I know this might seem forward, but would you consider having lunch with Lily and me today? She'd love to meet you, and honestly, it would mean a lot to me too." Jack hesitated. It had been years since he'd accepted any social invitation. His days had fallen into a comfortable routine of solitude, broken only by necessary errands and his regular spot at the diner. Michael must have sensed his uncertainty. Lily's been asking about Dad's old military friends. It would help her understand where she comes from, you know? And maybe, he smiled slightly, maybe you could tell her some stories about her grandfather that I haven't heard. Something stirred in Jack's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Here was Bob Carter's son, carrying on the SEAL tradition, raising a little girl alone, reaching out to him not out of pity but genuine respect. "What time?" Jack found himself asking. Michael's face lit up. "Would noon work? There's this little place downtown, Mary's Kitchen. They make the best chicken pot pie you've ever tasted." Jack nodded, surprising himself with how right it felt. Noon it is. They finished their coffee as the morning traffic picked up, neighbors heading to work and school buses making their rounds. When Michael stood to leave, he extended his hand. "Thank you, sir. Not just for lunch, but for everything. What you did for my father, what you stood for, it matters. It still matters." Jack shook his hand firmly. "Your father would be proud of you, son. Not just for the uniform, but for the man you've become." As Michael's truck pulled away, Jack remained in his rocking chair, the empty coffee cup in his hands. For the first time in years, his day had a purpose beyond mere routine. He found himself looking forward to lunch, to meeting little Lily, to sharing stories of her grandfather. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of dawn fog. Jack stood, his joints protesting slightly, and headed inside to get ready. He had a lunch date to prepare for, and somehow that simple fact made him feel more alive than he had in years. The midday sun beat down on Jack as he pulled up to Michael's modest single-story home. The white paint was peeling slightly, and bright flowers dotted the small front garden. Wind chimes tinkled softly from the covered porch, and a pink bicycle lay on its side in the grass. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he turned off his car engine. It had been years since he'd visited anyone's home, let alone spent time with a child. He took a deep breath, straightened his collar, and made his way up the concrete path to the front door. Before he could knock, the door flew open. A small figure with bouncing brown pigtails and a gap-toothed smile stood there, practically vibrating with excitement. "Daddy! He's here!" Lily called over her shoulder, then turned back to Jack. "Hi, I'm Lily. Daddy told me all about you this morning. He said you're a hero, just like Grandpa was." Jack felt his throat tighten. The little girl's earnest enthusiasm caught him off guard. "Well, I wouldn't say—" "Come in, come in!" Lily grabbed his hand without hesitation, tugging him inside. Her small fingers were warm and sticky, probably from whatever she'd been eating earlier. Michael appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Sorry about the hurricane that is my daughter," he said with a warm smile. "Lily, let Mr. Turner breathe." "It's fine," Jack said softly, surprised to find he meant it. The house smelled of fresh bread and something sweet baking in the oven. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator, and a well-loved teddy bear sat in a tiny rocking chair by the window. "I made cookies," Lily announced proudly. "Well, Daddy helped, but I put in the chocolate chips all by myself." "She's quite the baker," Michael added, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Would you like to join us in the backyard? We thought we'd have a little picnic lunch." Jack nodded, following them through the house. Photos lined the walls. Lily as a baby, Michael in his dress uniform, an older man who must have been Michael's father. The backyard was small but well kept, with a wooden swing set and a colorful blanket spread out on the grass. "Sit here next to me." Lily patted the blanket beside her. "Do you like peanut butter and jelly? Daddy makes the best sandwiches. He cuts off the crusts just how I like them." As they settled onto the blanket, Jack found himself transported back decades. He remembered countless picnics with his own daughter, Sarah, when she was Lily's age. The way she'd insisted on arranging everything just so, How she'd always save the strawberries for last. "Would you like turkey or PB&J?" Michael asked, pulling containers from a wicker basket. "PB&J," Jack answered, surprising himself. "Haven't had one in years." "Good choice," Lily beamed. "That's what I'm having, too. We can be sandwich twins." The simple meal stretched out pleasantly under the warm Sunday. Lily chattered about school, her friends, and her upcoming dance recital. She showed Jack her cartwheel, "Still working on it," and introduced him to her invisible friend, Princess Sparkles. "You know what?" Lily said suddenly, studying Jack's face with serious brown eyes. "You look just like the grandpa in my storybook, the one who takes care of the magical garden." "Do I now?" Jack felt a smile tugging at his lips. "Uh-huh. And since my other grandpa's in heaven with Mommy, maybe you could be my grandpa too?" She said it so simply, so honestly, that Jack felt his heart stutter in his chest. Michael started to intervene. "Lily, honey, I'd like that very much," Jack heard himself say, his voice rough with emotion. Lily's face lit up like a sunrise. "Really? Can I call you Grandpa Jack?" Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The last time anyone had looked at him with such pure joy and acceptance was when Sarah was small, before life and distance had created their current careful politeness. They shared chocolate chip cookies for dessert, still warm from the oven. Lily insisted on telling Jack the story behind every drawing on their refrigerator, then showed him her collection of seashells from their last beach trip. As the afternoon wore on, Jack found himself laughing more than he had in years. Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and Michael's quiet strength reminded him so much of his old SEAL teammates, of the brotherhood he'd once known so well. When it was time to leave, Jack stood slowly, his joints protesting the hours spent on the ground. "Thank you for lunch," he said formally, trying to maintain some composure despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Wait!" Lily cried. She darted across the yard and threw her arms around his waist, squeezing tight. "Thank you for being my grandpa," she whispered against his shirt. Jack's vision blurred with unexpected tears. He placed a gentle hand on her head, feeling the silky softness of her hair. The simple trust in her embrace broke something open inside him, a door he'd thought permanently sealed. "Thank you, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice thick with feeling. She smelled of sunshine and cookies and childhood, so much like Sarah had all those years ago. For the first time in decades, Jack felt truly seen, truly loved, not just as a veteran or a widower, but as someone who mattered. The late morning sun warmed Jack's shoulders as he held the wooden fence post steady. Michael worked beside him, digging the post hole deeper with practiced movements. Their synchronized effort made the work feel almost effortless, like a well-rehearsed dance. "A little more to the left, Grandpa Jack," Lily called from her perch on the back porch steps. She sat with her chin propped on her hands, swinging her feet in the air. "No, wait. Maybe right. I'm the supervisor, you know." Jack couldn't help but chuckle. In just a few days, he'd gotten used to her calling him Grandpa Jack. It felt right somehow, natural as breathing. "Is that so, Miss Supervisor? And what qualifies you for such an important position?" "I'm 7, Lily declared proudly, holding up 7 fingers. "And Daddy says I have good... what's the word?" She looked at Michael questioningly. "Attention to detail," Michael supplied, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Though right now, I think someone's just avoiding helping with the weeding." Lily giggled and scrambled down the steps, her yellow sundress fluttering. "I'll help. But first, can Grandpa Jack tell us another story? Please?" Michael leaned on his shovel, smiling. "Only if it's a good one. Nothing too scary for the supervisor." Jack pretended to think hard, though he'd already picked out several lighter stories he could share. "Well, there was this one time in '69 when we were stationed near Da Nang. We had this cook, fellow named Bobby Matthews. He launched into the tale of how Bobby had accidentally ordered 50 cases of Spam instead of 5, and how the unit had gotten creative with their meals for months afterward. Lily laughed at all the right moments, especially when Jack described the infamous spam and jelly bean surprise. As they worked, setting post after post, Michael asked questions about more than just the stories. "How did you handle it?" he said quietly while Lily was distracted with her weeding. "Being away from family for so long? I worry about Lily when I'm deployed." Jack paused, choosing his words carefully. "You make every moment count when you're home. Write letters, real letters, not just emails. And you remember why you're doing it." He glanced at Lily, who was now chasing a butterfly through the yard. "They understand more than we think they do." Michael nodded, absorbing the advice like a sponge. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her, like I'm not enough." "You're not failing," Jack said firmly. "Look at her, Michael. Really look. She's happy, healthy, and loved. That's what matters." They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, taking breaks for water and sandwiches that Lily supervised the making of. During one such break, she disappeared into the house and returned with paper and crayons, settling herself at the picnic table. "No peeking," she commanded, hunching over her artwork. "It's a surprise." Jack and Michael exchanged amused glances and returned to their fence mending. The air was filled with the sounds of birds, the scratch of crayons on paper, and comfortable conversation. It felt like family, Jack realized with a start, like belonging. When Lily finally presented her masterpiece, Jack's heart caught in his throat. She'd drawn 3 figures holding hands, a tall one in green, Michael in his uniform, a small one in yellow, herself, and another tall one with gray hair and a big smile, Jack. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "My family." "Do you like it?" she asked anxiously. "See, that's you, Grandpa Jack. And that's me and Daddy, and those are butterflies. And that's our house." "It's perfect," Jack managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." Later that evening, after helping Michael clean up their tools and accepting a dinner invitation for the next day, Jack carefully hung the drawing on his refrigerator at home. He stood back, looking at it for a long moment. The bright colors stood out against the plain white surface, making the kitchen feel warmer somehow, more alive. A few days ago, he'd been invisible. Now his refrigerator displayed a child's artwork. Now his days had purpose beyond mere routine. Now his phone contained text messages and photos from Michael and Lily. Now, the sound of his phone ringing startled him from his thoughts. It was Michael. "Hey, Jack." Michael's voice sounded strained. "Sorry to bother you so late, but I just got a call from my CO." Jack watched through his kitchen window as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Michael's voice grew more serious with each word, and Jack could hear the tension building. "I understand, sir," Michael was saying to someone else. "He must have gotten another call." "Yes, sir. First thing tomorrow." The line went quiet for a moment, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was different, darker, worried. "Jack, I need to." Michael's hands trembled as he set down his coffee mug on the kitchen table. Jack noticed how the young man's shoulders slumped, the weight of invisible burdens pressing down on him. Through the window, they could see Lily playing with her jump rope in the backyard, her pigtails bouncing with each hop. "Sir, I need to tell you something," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in trouble. Big trouble." Jack leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "Whatever it is, son, you can tell me." Michael drew a deep breath. "They're trying to discharge me, dishonorably." The words seemed to physically pain him. "There are accusations about my last mission in Afghanistan. They're saying I abandoned my post, endangered civilians." His voice cracked. "But it's not true, Jack. I swear on my father's grave, it's not true." Jack studied Michael's face, seeing the same earnest determination he'd seen in countless young SEALs over the years, the kind of look that couldn't lie. "Tell me everything," Jack said quietly. As Michael explained the details, Jack's jaw tightened. The mission had gone sideways, they often did. but Michael had followed protocol. Yet somehow, reports had been filed painting a very different picture. Evidence had appeared suggesting dereliction of duty. "I don't understand where these accusations are coming from," Michael said, running his hands through his hair. "I've given everything to the Navy, just like my father did. And now..." He glanced out at Lily. "If this goes through, I'll lose everything. My pension, my benefits, my reputation. How will I take care of her?" A squeal of laughter drew their attention outside. Lily had given up on the jump rope and was now chasing a butterfly, her face bright with joy. The contrast between her innocence and the darkness threatening her future made Jack's heart ache. Through the next hour, they talked in low voices. Jack watched how Michael's eyes kept darting to the window, checking on Lily. The young man's fingers drummed nervously on the table, his coffee long forgotten and cold. When Lily came bounding in for lunch, Michael's entire demeanor changed. He forced a smile, helping her make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But Jack saw how tightly Michael hugged her, as if afraid she might disappear. "Daddy, why are you squeezing so hard?" Lily giggled. "Because I love you so much, Princess," Michael answered, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too." She wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Can we go to the park later, please?" Michael swallowed hard. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. Daddy has some work to do today." Jack watched as disappointment flickered across Lily's face, quickly replaced by understanding beyond her years. She patted her father's cheek.
"It's okay, Daddy. We can go another time."
After lunch, while Lily worked on her coloring books in the living room, Michael paced the kitchen.
"I don't know what to do, Jack. The hearing is in 3 weeks.
"My lawyer says it doesn't look good." Jack sat at the table, his mind churning. He could walk away now, return to his quiet life. After all, he'd been retired for years. His connections were old, possibly forgotten. Fighting this battle might mean stirring up painful memories, calling in favors he'd hoped never to need. But then Lily's voice drifted in from the other room, singing a made-up song about butterflies and sunshine. Jack remembered how it felt when she first called him Grandpa, how Michael had brought light back into his gray world. He thought of his own daughter, so far away now. He'd failed to fight for that relationship, let it slip away like sand through his fingers. The thought of Michael losing Lily, of that precious child losing her father to false accusations, made something fierce and protective stir in his chest. Jack pulled out his ancient flip phone, the one he kept more out of habit than necessity. His fingers hovered over the keypad as doubt crept in. But then he looked at Michael, seeing not just the strong young SEAL, but also the scared father fighting for his family. "I know some people," Jack said finally, his voice gravelly. "Good people. People who understand what really happens in the field, who know how to find the truth." Hope flickered in Michael's eyes. "You'd do that? Help me fight this?" "Son, when your father saved my life, he made me promise to look out for his family if he ever couldn't. I've carried that promise for 30 years. Jack started dialing a number he hadn't used in over a decade. "It's time I kept it." Michael sank into a chair, relief and gratitude warring on his face. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by being the father that little girl deserves," Jack replied, waiting as the phone rang. After 4 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Bobby? It's Jack Turner." A pause. "Well, I'll be damned. Turner, haven't heard your voice since '89. Bobby, I need your help. Remember that favor you owe me from Saigon? The one where you pulled my sorry behind out of that rice paddy under heavy fire? Hell, Turner, I've been waiting 30 years for you to call that one in." Jack's eyes met Michael's across the table. "Well, I'm calling it in now. And Bobby, this is important. Real important." The Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall stood like a worn sentinel on the outskirts of town, its red brick walls faded by decades of sun and rain. American and POW divided by MIA flags snapped in the morning breeze as Jack pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, His old friend Frank had agreed to meet him here, away from curious ears. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and wooden furniture brought back memories. A few elderly veterans sat scattered around, some playing cards, others just staring into space. Jack spotted Frank at a corner table, hunched over a steaming mug. Frank Delaney hadn't changed much in the past decade. Still built like a bulldog, with gray stubble and hard eyes that had seen too much. He stood up when he saw Jack, revealing his slight limp from an old wound that never quite healed right. "Turner," Frank growled, extending a calloused hand. "Been a while." They shook hands firmly, the grip of men who'd carried weapons together. Jack settled into the chair across from his old friend. Noting how Frank had positioned himself to watch both the door and windows, old habits died hard. "Thanks for coming, Frank. I need your help." Frank's weathered face creased into a frown. "Yeah, you mentioned on the phone. Young SEAL in trouble?" He took a long sip of coffee. "Tell me everything." Jack leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "His name's Michael Carter. Good kid, decorated combat record. Now they're trying to drum him out with a dishonorable over something that happened on his last deployment. What's the official charge? Dereliction of duty, endangering civilians. But Frank..." Jack's jaw tightened. "This boy's not capable of that. He's raising a little girl alone, doing everything right. Something's not adding up." Frank set down his mug with deliberate care. These days, the brass is real quick to throw good men under the bus. Politics. He spat the word like it tasted bad. "But if you're vouching for him, that means something. His father served with us. Remember Doug Carter?" Frank's eyes widened slightly. "Doug's boy?" "Hell." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "That mission in 71. Yeah. Doug saved both our hides that night. Now his son needs our help." Frank was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. When he looked up, his eyes had that old fire Jack remembered from combat. "All right, let's talk strategy." For the next hour, they hunched over the table, speaking in low voices. Frank pulled out a small notebook, making lists and diagrams. His decades of experience dealing with military bureaucracy emerged as he outlined possible approaches. "First thing," Frank said, "we need eyes on the official report. I've still got some connections in the JAG office, folks who owe me favors. We'll start there." "What about witnesses? Other SEALs who were on that deployment?" Frank nodded. "Already thinking about that. Got a few names in mind. Veterans who might have heard things through the grapevine. Military's a small world, especially special operations. How do we reach them? Leave that to me." Frank's expression grew serious. "But Jack, you need to understand what we're getting into. This won't be easy. The system's designed to protect itself, not the truth. We start pulling threads, some powerful people might push back." Jack thought of Lily's smile, of Michael's quiet dignity. "I don't care about powerful people. I care about what's right. That's the Turner I remember." Frank smiled grimly. Always did have more guts than sense. He reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Here's what I've put together so far. Names, numbers, places to start. Some of these folks might not want to talk, but mention my name, or yours." Jack took the folder, feeling its weight. "I owe you, Frank. You don't owe me anything. Doug Carter saved our lives that night. This is about paying that debt." Frank's voice softened slightly. "Besides, someone's got to look out for our own. World's forgotten too many good soldiers already." They stood up slowly, joints protesting. Frank gripped Jack's shoulder. "Watch yourself, brother, and keep me posted. I'll start making calls today." Jack nodded, tucking the folder under his arm. As he walked toward the door, the weight of it felt familiar, like mission briefings from long ago. The war he thought he'd left behind was calling him back, but this time the battlefield would be different. No jungle or gunfire, but the same high stakes. A good man's future hanging in the balance. Frank's voice stopped him at the door. Hey, Turner. Jack turned. Good to see you back in the fight. The morning sun hit Jack's face as he stepped outside. In his car, he set the folder carefully on the passenger seat, noticing how his hands had steadied. The uncertainty of the past few days had crystallized into purpose. He had a mission again, a cause worth fighting for. He pulled out of the parking lot, the VFW hull shrinking in his rearview mirror. The folder beside him held the first steps of their battle plan. It wasn't the kind of war he'd trained for, but the old instincts were awakening. Protect your own. Never leave a man behind. Fight with everything you have. The late morning sun warmed Jack's back as he stood in Michael's driveway, watching Lily bounce with excitement next to a shiny blue bicycle. Michael had left early for his preliminary hearing, his pressed uniform a stark reminder of the battles ahead. But today, Jack had promised to focus on Lily.
Can we start now, Grandpa? Please?
Lily hopped from foot to foot, her pigtails swaying with each movement. She wore a pink helmet decorated with butterfly stickers, and her eyes sparkled with determination. All right, sweetheart. Jack chuckled, running his hand along the bike's handlebars. First things first, let's check your helmet. He knelt down, his joints protesting slightly, and adjusted the straps under her chin. The familiar motion reminded him of teaching his own daughter decades ago. Back then, he'd been deployed so often, missed so many moments. But now, time felt like a gift rather than an enemy. Remember what I told you? Jack asked, holding the bike steady. Keep pedaling, look ahead, and trust you've got me, Lily recited proudly. That's my girl. Jack smiled, positioning himself behind the bike. Ready? Lily nodded, gripping the handlebars tight. Jack held the back of the seat, and together they started moving down the quiet suburban street. Lily wobbled at first, but Jack's steady hand kept her upright. You're doing great, honey. Keep those feet moving. Lily's initial nervousness gave way to growing confidence. Her pedaling became stronger, more rhythmic. Jack felt the bike stabilizing under his grip. I think you're ready to try on your own, he said after their third pass down the street. Don't let go. Lily's voice quivered slightly. I won't let go until you're ready, Jack promised. But he could feel it. She was ready. Just needed that little push of confidence. They made one more pass, and this time, Jack gradually loosened his grip on the seat. Lily didn't notice at first, too focused on pedaling and steering. When she finally realized she was riding alone, her delighted laugh echoed through the neighborhood. Grandpa, look, I'm doing it. Jack's heart swelled with pride as he watched her ride, wobbly but determined, all by herself. She made it to the end of the street before carefully turning around, just like he'd taught her. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of small victories and shared joy. When the sun began to set, they headed inside. Jack's old military precision came in handy as he prepared dinner, simple spaghetti and meatballs, Lily's favorite. Can you cook this again tomorrow? Lily asked, twirling pasta around her fork. We'll see what your dad wants to do when he gets home, Jack replied, watching her eat with satisfaction. But I'd love to cook for you again. After dinner, Jack helped Lily with her bedtime routine. She insisted on wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with little stars all over them. As she brushed her teeth, Jack laid out her clothes for tomorrow, just like he remembered doing for his own daughter. Story time, Lily announced, climbing into bed and patting the space beside her. Jack settled onto the edge of her bed, picking up the worn copy of the Velveteen Rabbit from her nightstand. As he read, Lily snuggled closer, her small hand finding his free one. What is real? Asked the rabbit one day. Jack began, his voice soft and steady. Halfway through the story, Lily interrupted with a question that caught him off guard. Grandpa Jack? Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to stay with us? Forever and ever? Her voice was small, uncertain. Jack set the book down, turning to face her properly. In her eyes, he saw the same fear of abandonment he'd once seen in his own daughter's eyes during his deployments. Lily, he said gently, I promise you this. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here whenever you need me. Even when I'm big? Even when you're big. He squeezed her hand. That's what grandpas are for? Satisfied with his answer, Lily let him finish the story. Her eyes grew heavy as he reached the final pages, and by the time he closed the book, she was fast asleep. Jack sat there for a long moment, watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, one arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed elephant. In that quiet moment, something profound settled over him. This was his second chance, not just at being a grandfather, but at being the kind of father figure he'd always wanted to be. The kind who was present, who didn't miss the small moments, who could be counted on to stay. Looking at Lily's sleeping form, Jack felt tears prick at his eyes. He hadn't expected this gift, this opportunity to pour all his love and wisdom into another young life. But here it was, wrapped in star-covered pajamas, and trusting him completely. He carefully tucked the blanket around her shoulders and brushed a gentle kiss on her forehead. As he stood in the doorway, he took one last look at his sleeping granddaughter, not by blood, but by a bond just as strong. The empty spaces in his heart, carved out by years of loneliness, began to fill with something warm and bright. Hope. Jack shifted uncomfortably in the metal folding chair, surrounded by a circle of veterans at the VFW hall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the smell of old coffee lingered in the air. He hadn't been to a support meeting in years, but desperation had driven him here. "Good to see you again, Turner," said Bill Martinez, the group facilitator. His salt and pepper hair and weathered face showed the years since they'd last met. "Been a while since you've joined us." Jack nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Around him sat 24 veterans of various ages, some from Vietnam like him, others from more recent conflicts. Their faces were familiar yet strange, like photographs from a long-forgotten album. I need help," Jack said, his voice rougher than he expected.
Not for myself, for a young SEAL named Michael Carter.
The room grew still. Jack could feel their eyes on him as he explained Michael's situation, the accusations, the threat of dishonorable discharge, the little girl who might lose her father. His voice grew stronger as he spoke about Michael's character, about the connection to his own past. "I know this boy's innocent," Jack finished. "Same as I'm sitting here." To his surprise, heads began nodding around the circle. A Desert Storm veteran named Rodriguez leaned forward. "Private contractors over there are getting worse than ever, throwing our boys under the bus to cover their tracks." "What do you mean?" Jack asked, his attention sharpening. Another veteran, Dave Wilson, spoke up. "My nephew served last year. Said these contractor outfits are running wild, no oversight, no accountability, making millions while our soldiers take the heat for their mistakes." More voices joined in, sharing similar stories. Jack listened intently, taking mental notes. The pattern was clear and disturbing. After the meeting, as others filed out, a man Jack didn't recognize approached him. He was tall and lean, with careful movements that marked him as former Special Forces. "Name's Harris," he said quietly. "Worked intelligence before retiring. That Carter case you mentioned? It's not the first." They moved to a corner of the room, away from others. Harris pulled out his phone, showing Jack news articles and military reports. "See this company? Global Security Solutions?" Harris pointed to a logo. "They've been involved in 3 similar cases in the past year. Young officers accused of misconduct. Evidence appears out of nowhere. Careers destroyed." Jack's stomach tightened. "And they were involved in Michael's last deployment?" Harris nodded grimly. "Their personnel were operating in the same sector. Word is, they botched an operation badly. Civilians got hurt, but the official report pins it all on your boy Michael." Jack studied the documents, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. The sudden accusations, the convenient evidence, the rush to judgment. This wasn't just about Michael anymore. "These contractors," Jack said slowly, "they're powerful, ex-military leadership, Political connections, billion-dollar contracts, Harris replied. They make problems disappear. And anyone who might expose those problems, they make them disappear too. Jack felt a chill despite the warm room. He thought of Michael, of little Lily waiting at home for her father. He thought of all the other soldiers who might have faced similar frame jobs. "I've got more information," Harris said, writing a number on a napkin. "But Turner, be careful. These people play rough, real rough." The meeting room had emptied now, leaving them alone under the buzzing lights. Jack pocketed the napkin, his jaw set with determination. What had started as helping a young SEAL clear, his name had just become something much bigger and much more dangerous. "They might be powerful," Jack said, standing up straight despite his aging joints.
"But they've never faced a bunch of old SEALs with nothing left to lose."
Harris gave him a measuring look. "Watch your back, Turner. And watch Michael's too. This goes deeper than you know." Jack walked out into the afternoon sun, his mind churning with this new information. The weight of what he'd learned pressed down on him like a physical burden. Michael wasn't just fighting false accusations. He was up against a corporate giant with everything to lose and the means to protect itself. He got into his truck, gripping the steering wheel tight. The napkin with Harris's number seemed to burn in his pocket. One thing was certain, the quiet life he'd been living was about to get a lot more complicated. Glancing at his rearview mirror, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the game had changed. This wasn't just about clearing Michael's name anymore. It was about exposing a system that sacrificed good soldiers to protect the powerful and corrupt. He started the engine, thoughts turning to his next move. He'd need to be careful, strategic, like planning a mission in the old days. But first, he had to warn Michael about what they were really up against. The truck pulled away from the VFW hall, carrying Jack toward a fight he never expected to face in his 70s. But as the adrenaline began to flow, he realized something. He felt more alive than he had in years. The military courtroom felt suffocating with its dark wood panels and harsh overhead lights. Jack Turner sat rigidly in his dress blues, which still fit after all these years, though a bit more snugly around the middle. His weathered hands rested on his knees as he watched Michael sitting at attention before the tribunal panel. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Town locals packed the seats, their presence a mix of curiosity and concern. Mayor Thompson sat in the front row, his usual jovial expression replaced by a serious frown. Even Sally from the diner had closed up early to attend, her order pad still tucked in her apron pocket. Michael's shoulders were straight, but Jack could see the tension in his jaw. Lily wasn't allowed in the proceedings, thank goodness. She was with Mrs. Rodriguez next door, probably worrying about her daddy. The head of the tribunal, Colonel Harrison, called Jack's name. "Master Chief Petty Officer Turner, please approach." Jack stood slowly, his knees protesting. As he walked to the witness stand, his footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent room. He could feel every eye on him. But for once, being seen didn't make him want to disappear. After taking the oath, Jack settled into the hard wooden chair. The military prosecutor, a sharp-featured captain, started with basic questions about Jack's service record and relationship to Michael. "And how long have you known the accused?" the prosecutor asked. 2 months, Jack replied. "But I served with his father 30 years ago." "Only 2 months?" The prosecutor's eyebrows rose. "Yet you're willing to stake your reputation on his character?" Jack leaned forward slightly. "Son, in combat, you learn to measure a man's character in seconds, not months. It's the difference between life and death." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The prosecutor frowned but pressed on. "And what makes you so certain of Lieutenant Carter's innocence?" Jack took a deep breath. He hadn't prepared a speech, but the words came naturally, rising from somewhere deep in his chest. "I've seen courage wear many faces over the years," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I've seen it in young men charging into gunfire to save their brothers. I've seen it in soldiers who carried on despite their wounds. But sometimes the greatest courage is in living an honorable life, day after day, especially when everything's stacked against you. The room grew still. Even the prosecutor stopped shuffling his papers. Michael Carter is raising his daughter alone while serving his country. Every decision he makes, every risk he takes, isn't just about him. It's about that little girl who calls him Daddy. A man like that doesn't throw away his honor for profit or pride. Jack's eyes swept the room, meeting the gazes of the tribunal members. I've known men who've betrayed their oaths. They carry it in their eyes, in the way they hold themselves. Michael Carter stands straight. He looks you in the eye. He's teaching his daughter about integrity not just with words, but with his actions. Mayor Thompson nodded slowly from his seat. Sally wiped her eyes with her apron corner. The charges against him don't match the man I know, Jack continued. They don't match the son of the hero I served with, who gave his life saving others. They don't match the father who reads bedtime stories every night, no matter how exhausted he is from training. Jack's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. In Vietnam, we had a saying, "The only easy day was yesterday." Michael lives by those words. He faces each challenge head-on, with honor and determination. That's not the character of a man who would disgrace his uniform or betray his fellow SEALs. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. You seem very certain, Master Chief. I am certain, sir. Jack's voice never wavered. Because I've seen what honor looks like. I've seen it in the eyes of men giving their last breath for their country. I see it in Michael Carter every time he puts on his uniform, every time he hugs his daughter, every time he chooses the hard right over the easy wrong. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but Jack wasn't finished. This isn't just about one man's career or reputation. It's about what we stand for as a nation. It's about the promise we make to every soldier, that loyalty goes both ways, that we don't abandon our own without absolute proof of wrongdoing. Jack looked directly at Michael, whose eyes had grown bright with unshed tears. I may be old, and some days I feel invisible, but I can still recognize a good man when I see one. Michael Carter is one of the best I've ever known, and I'm proud to stand with him today. The room erupted in applause before the colonel could call for order. Jack saw faces in the crowd that he recognized from town. People who had barely noticed him before were now standing, clapping, showing their support. After the testimony concluded and a short recess was called, Jack and Michael walked out of the courthouse together. The afternoon sun felt warm on their faces after the cold formality of the courtroom. Town folks stopped to shake their hands or pat their shoulders. Thank you, sir, Michael said quietly as they descended the courthouse steps. What you said in there? His voice caught. Jack squeezed his shoulder. Meant every word, son. They stood for a moment in the sunlight, watching people from town, gathering in small groups, discussing the hearing. The mood had shifted. Where there had been whispers of scandal, there was now talk of support and justice. Mrs. Rodriguez approached with Lily, who broke free and ran to her father. Michael scooped her up, holding her close. She reached out one small hand to Jack, and he took it, feeling the warmth of her tiny fingers. Did you help, Daddy? She asked. Jack smiled, his heart full. I tried, sweetheart. I tried. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly alive. Not invisible, not forgotten, but present and purposeful. Whatever the tribunal's decision would be, he knew he'd done right by Michael, by Lily, and by himself. The tribunal room had just settled after Jack's moving testimony. Hope filled the air like sunshine after a storm. Colonel Harrison was shuffling his papers, about to call for a brief recess, when the heavy wooden doors burst open. Michael's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, stumbled in, his tie askew and forehead beaded with sweat. He clutched a laptop to his chest like it contained toxic waste. Your Honor, he wheezed. New evidence has just been submitted. Jack's stomach dropped. He'd been in enough firefights to recognize when things were about to go sideways. The laptop was connected to the courtroom's projection system. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy night vision footage. The timestamp showed 3 months ago, during Michael's last deployment. The green-tinted video revealed a figure unmistakably Michael, accepting what appeared to be an envelope from a local civilian. The scene shifted to the same figure escorting unauthorized personnel through a restricted area. Jack watched Michael's face drain of color. The young SEAL's hands gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles turned white. "As you can see," the prosecution stated smugly, "Lieutenant Carter clearly violated multiple protocols. This footage was recovered from security archives and authenticated by 3 independent experts." The whispers started immediately. Jack turned to see Mayor Thompson shaking his head, disappointment etched on his face. Sally from the diner wouldn't meet Jack's eyes. The tide of support was turning faster than a riptide. During the recess, Jack tried to approach some of the townspeople he'd known for years. Mrs. Baker, who just last week brought Michael a casserole, hurried past without a word. Tom from the hardware store suddenly became very interested in his phone. It was like Jack had become invisible again, but worse, now he was contaminated by association. The next few days were brutal. Jack walked into the diner for his usual breakfast, only to find his regular booth occupied. Sally served him coffee without her usual smile, setting the cup down so quickly it sloshed over the rim. No one offered to refill it. "Did you hear?" a voice carried from across the diner. "That SEAL fellow, the one living over on Maple? Turns out he was working with the enemy." "Such a shame," another replied. "And that poor little girl of his." Jack's eggs turned to ash in his mouth. Lily. His heart ached thinking about her. He found out how bad it was when he picked her up from school the next day. Michael had a meeting with his lawyer, so Jack had offered to help. He found Lily sitting alone on the steps, her small shoulders hunched. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Ready to go home?" Lily looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Tommy said Daddy's a bad guy," she whispered. "He said Daddy's going to jail like other bad guys. Is that true, Grandpa Jack?" Jack's throat tightened. He knelt down, his old knees protesting. "Your daddy is a good man, Lily. Sometimes good people get accused of things they didn't do. We just have to keep believing in him." But as they walked home, he noticed how other parents pulled their children closer, how conversations stopped when they passed. Lily's hand squeezed his tighter. That evening, Jack visited Michael's house. The young man was at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. The proud SEAL who'd approached Jack in the diner seemed ages ago. Michael looked hollowed out. "They're pushing for dishonorable discharge," Michael said without looking up. "Minimum 5 years in military prison. The video." He ran his hands through his hair. "I never. Jack, I would never." "I know, son," Jack said quietly. "The lawyer says to prepare for the worst. I've already called my sister in Ohio. She'll take Lily while I'm—" Michael's voice cracked. "How do I tell her? How do I tell my little girl that Daddy's going away?" Jack's chest felt too tight. The family he'd found, this second chance at belonging, it was crumbling like sand through his fingers. He thought of Lily's drawings on his fridge, of teaching her to ride a bike, of the way she called him Grandpa without hesitation. "We're not done fighting," Jack said, but the words felt hollow even to him. Michael finally looked up. His eyes were those of a defeated man. "I appreciate everything you've done, Jack, but maybe it's better if you distance yourself now. The town's already turning against you because of me. You've built a life here. I won't drag you down too. Michael, please." Michael's voice was firm. "I need to know Lily will have someone to turn to who isn't tainted. Someone the town still trusts." Jack stood there, feeling every one of his 72 years. The weight of helplessness pressed down on him like a heavy pack after too many miles. Through the window, he could see Lily in the backyard, sitting on the swing he'd helped Michael hang just weeks ago. She wasn't swinging, just sitting there, watching the sun set. The footage played again in his mind. Something about it nagged at him. but he couldn't place what. Right now, all he could feel was the family he'd found slipping away, like a dream fading in the harsh light of morning. He left Michael's house that night with leaden feet. The porch light cast his shadow long and lonely across the lawn. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against Lily's latest drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands labeled, "My Family." He couldn't bring himself to look at it. The next morning's headlines would make everything worse. Local SEAL faces prison time. Hero image shattered. The town had made up its mind. The family Jack had found, the purpose he'd rediscovered, the joy of being needed and loved, it was all falling apart. And there seemed to be nothing he could do to stop it. Jack sat alone in his dimly lit living room, the evening shadows creeping across worn furniture that had seen better days. His weathered hands cradled the silver picture frame holding Margaret's photo. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to mock his current situation. 30 years she'd been gone, and here he was, about to lose another family. "I thought I was done losing people," he whispered to the photograph. Margaret's eyes sparkled back at him, just as they had that summer day when the picture was taken. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one she'd insisted on being buried in. The house creaked around him, empty and hollow. Bills lay scattered across his coffee table, unopened. His daughter's last Christmas card from 6 months ago sat propped against a dusty lamp, the smiling faces of her and her husband staring back at him from their perfect life 2 states away. Jack's fingers traced the edge of Margaret's frame. "Remember when we thought we'd grow old together? Watch our grandkids play in the yard?" His voice cracked. "I found them, Maggie. Found our grandkid. And now..." The damning video footage played over and over in his mind. Michael's face, or what looked like his face, doing things no SEAL would ever do. The whispers in town had started immediately. People who'd shaken Michael's hand days ago now crossed the street to avoid him. A knock at the door startled Jack from his thoughts. He knew that firm military precision. Michael's knock. "It's open," Jack called out, not moving from his chair. Michael stepped inside, his usual proud posture diminished. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his civilian clothes looked rumpled.
"Sir, we need to talk."
"Don't sir me now, son," Jack said, setting Margaret's photo aside. "Not after everything." Michael paced the small living room, hands clasped behind his back like he was giving a mission report. "You need to stop making calls. Stop investigating. Just stop fighting for me." Jack's jaw tightened. "Like hell I will. I mean it." Michael's voice carried an edge of desperation.
"These people, whoever doctored that footage, they're powerful, connected."
"I won't have you putting yourself at risk for me. I'm 72 years old. What can they do to me? They can hurt you, ruin what life you have left." Michael stopped pacing, his eyes meeting Jack's. "I've already lost my father. I won't lose you too." The words hit Jack like physical blows. He struggled to his feet, his bad knee protesting. "You listen to me, son. I've spent too many years being invisible, letting life pass me by. I won't stand by and watch them destroy you." "It's my fight," Michael insisted. "It became my fight the moment Lily called me Grandpa." At the mention of his daughter, Michael's facade cracked. He sank onto Jack's couch, head in his hands. "She asked me today if we have to move away, if we have to change our names like they do in movies. My 7-year-old shouldn't have to think about things like that." Jack's heart ached. He remembered Lily's visit earlier that day, her small face serious as she helped him water his tomato plants. "Grandpa Jack," she'd asked, carefully pouring water from her little green watering can, "why do grown-ups always leave?" The innocent question had nearly broken him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mommy left, and now everyone at school says Daddy did bad things and has to leave." She'd looked up at him, her eyes too old for her young face. "Are you going to leave too?" He'd knelt down right there in the dirt, ignoring his protesting joints, and pulled her close. "Never, baby girl. Never." Now, watching Michael's defeated posture, Jack felt the weight of that promise. The curse of loss hung heavy in the air. Margaret, his distant daughter, and now this family he'd only just found. "I can't let you keep fighting," Michael said quietly. "I won't be responsible for dragging you down with me. That's not your choice to make." "It is. I'm ordering you to stand down." Michael stood, straightening his shoulders. "That's a direct order, Chief Turner." Jack almost laughed at the absurdity. "I've been retired longer than you've been alive, son. Your orders don't mean squat to me." But Michael was already heading for the door, his movements stiff and formal.
"Goodbye, sir. Thank you for everything you've done for us."
The door closed with a quiet click that seemed to echo through Jack's entire body. He stood in the middle of his living room, surrounded by memories and ghosts, feeling the familiar coldness of isolation creeping back in. Hours later, Jack lay in his bed, sleep eluding him. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above, casting moving shadows that transformed into jungle canopies in his mind. The faces of men he'd lost in Vietnam blended with Michael's. The sound of his daughter's goodbye when she'd moved away mixed with Lily's innocent question about adults leaving. He'd failed them all, hadn't he? Failed to save his brothers in arms, failed to keep his daughter close, failed to protect Margaret from the cancer that took her, and now he was failing Michael and Lily. The darkness pressed in around him, thick and suffocating. His chest felt tight. Memories of smoke and gunfire threatening to overwhelm him. He could hear the choppers, smell the jungle, feel the weight of his rifle. Jack rolled over, punching his pillow in frustration. The digital clock glowed 3:17 a.m., its red numbers accusatory in the darkness. Beside it sat Margaret's photo, watching him sink deeper into his private hell of regret and helplessness. Sleep wouldn't come. Not tonight. Not with the ghosts of his past mingling with the very real possibility of losing his future. He lay there, feeling every one of his 72 years, wondering if this was his curse, to find people to love only to watch them slip away. The morning sun cast long shadows across Michael's front yard as Jack's old truck pulled into the driveway. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel before he cut the engine. This would be goodbye. The hardest kind. The kind that meant giving up. The screen door creaked open before he reached the porch. Michael stood there, his normally pristine uniform wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes telling stories of sleepless nights. He managed a weak smile. "Sir, you didn't have to come," Michael said, his voice rough. "Had to see you both one last time," Jack replied, his throat tight. The words felt like gravel in his mouth. Inside, the house felt different. The warmth that had filled these rooms just days ago had faded, replaced by a heavy stillness. Photos on the wall, Michael in his dress blues, Lily's school pictures, even the crayon drawing Lily had made of their family, seemed to watch Jack with accusation. "Coffee?" Michael offered mechanically. "Please." They sat at the kitchen table, the silence broken only by the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of Lily playing in her room. Jack studied his coffee cup, unable to meet Michael's eyes. "The lawyer says I should take a plea deal," Michael finally said. "Might reduce the sentence." Jack's hand tightened around his cup. "Son, I'm sorry. I really thought we could fix this." "You tried. That's more than anyone else did." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Lily asks about you every day." As if summoned by her name, small footsteps padded down the hallway. Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Her face lit up when she saw Jack. "Grandpa!" She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around his waist. The simple gesture made his chest ache. "Hey, sweetheart," Jack managed, patting her head gently. "Daddy's been sad," she whispered, looking up at him with those big brown eyes. "Are you sad too?" "Sometimes grown-ups get sad, honey," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can I show you something?" Lily tugged at his hand. "In my room?" Jack glanced at Michael, who nodded tiredly. "Go ahead." Lily led Jack down the hallway to her bedroom. decorated in soft pinks and yellows. Crayon drawings covered one wall, stick figures of her, Michael. And now Jack featured prominently in many of them. She pulled him to sit on the edge of her small bed. "Close your eyes," she instructed solemnly. Jack complied, hearing her rummage through what sounded like a drawer. Something was pressed into his hands. "Okay, look." He opened his eyes to find a small paper fortune teller, the kind kids made in school. Carefully folded paper, covered in wobbly writing and decorated with hearts and stars. "Pick a color," Lily demanded. "Blue," Jack said softly. She spelled it out, manipulating the paper with careful concentration. "Now pick a number." 4. She counted it out, then opened the flap. Her face grew serious as she read what was written inside. "It says, 'Never stop believing.'" She looked up at him. "Remember? That's what you told me when I was scared about riding my bike. You said I had to believe in myself." Jack's breath caught in his throat. The simple wisdom of a child's memory hit him like a physical blow. "You said brave people never stop believing," Lily continued, her small hand finding his. "Are you going to stop believing in Daddy?" The question pierced straight through Jack's heart. Here he was, about to walk away, to surrender to despair, and this 7-year-old girl was reminding him of his own words about courage. He looked at Lily's earnest face, saw the trust there, the unwavering faith that Grandpa could fix anything, the same faith he'd once had in his own father, in his brothers in arms, in the principles that had guided his entire life. Something shifted inside him, like rusty gears grinding back to life. The weakness that had been drowning him these past days began to burn away, replaced by a familiar steel in his spine. "No," he said quietly, then stronger. "No, I'm not going to stop believing." Lily beamed at him. "Promise?" "I promise." He pulled her into a tight hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. "Thank you, sweetheart." When they returned to the kitchen, Michael looked up questioningly at the change in Jack's expression. "I need to make a phone call," Jack said, his voice firm. "And then we're going to talk about what really happened on that mission. Everything you remember, no matter how small." Michael straightened slightly, responding instinctively to the command in Jack's tone. "Yes, sir." Outside on the porch, Jack pulled out his phone and dialed Frank's number. His old friend answered on the second ring. "Frank, it's Jack." He watched the morning sun climbing higher over the neighborhood, casting away the shadows. "We're not done yet." Frank's living room buzzed with determination as 5 aging veterans huddled around his coffee table. Maps, documents, and coffee cups cluttered the surface. Jack sat in an old leather armchair, his weathered hands gripping a notepad while Frank paced the worn carpet. "Listen up, brothers," Frank announced, his gruff voice commanding attention. "We've got a SEAL in trouble, and we don't leave our own behind." The small group consisted of men Jack had known for decades. Pete Martinez, a former intelligence officer with sharp eyes despite his 70 years. Tom Wheeler, who'd worked in military communications. And Bill Roberts, who'd maintained connections in private security firms. "This contractor company, Strategic Solutions International," Pete said, spreading out some papers. "They've got a pattern. 3 other incidents in the past 2 years where soldiers reported misconduct, then suddenly found themselves accused of crimes." Jack leaned forward, his joints creaking. "How did they get away with it?" "Money talks," Bill growled, adjusting his hearing aid. "They've got friends in high places, but they made one mistake this time. They got sloppy with the video." Tom wheeled his chair closer to the table, pointing at freeze frames from the footage. "Look here, the metadata doesn't match. The timestamps are inconsistent with the mission logs." Frank grabbed a magnifying glass, his hands slightly shaking with age, but his mind still razor sharp. "The lighting's wrong too. See how the shadows fall? That's not afternoon sun like they claim. That's morning light." Jack felt his pulse quicken. "Can we prove it?" "Better," Pete said, pulling out his phone. "I've got a contact at the base where they edited the footage. A young tech specialist who noticed irregularities. She's willing to talk." The room grew quiet as Pete played a recorded conversation. A woman's voice detailed how she'd been ordered to clean up surveillance footage, but had secretly kept the original files. "This is dangerous territory, boys," Frank warned, looking at each man in turn. "SSI has mercenaries on payroll. They don't play nice." Jack thought of Lily's words about believing. He thought of Michael's face when the video first appeared, that look of betrayal and hopelessness. "I don't care about the risk. Where's this tech specialist now?" "That's the tricky part," Pete said. "She's at Fort Bennett, but she's under surveillance. SSI knows she might talk." "Then we go in quiet," Jack said, his old tactical mind clicking into gear. "Tom, can you still work communications?" Tom grinned, patting his laptop. "Just because I'm old doesn't mean I can't jam a few signals." They spent the next 3 hours planning. Bill drew detailed layouts of Fort Bennett's civilian sectors. Pete coordinated with his contact. Frank made calls to friendly MPs who could look the other way at the right moment. Jack felt alive again, the familiar rush of preparing for a mission flowing through his veins. But this wasn't like Vietnam. They weren't young anymore. Their hands shook sometimes. Their backs ached. Their eyes weren't as sharp. Yet their minds remained strong. And more importantly, they had something younger soldiers didn't: decades of experience and a network of loyal friends. The next day, they put their plan into action. Tom set up in a van outside the base, monitoring frequencies. Pete created a distraction at the main gate with a group of visiting veterans. Bill's security contacts ensured certain cameras would malfunction. Jack and Frank, dressed in maintenance uniforms, walked right through a side entrance. Their aged appearance worked in their favor. No one looked twice at 2 elderly workers. The tech specialist, Sarah Chen, was waiting in a server room. Her hands trembled as she handed over a flash drive. "Everything's here," she whispered. "The original footage, the edit logs, the orders from SSI. They're not just framing Michael, they're covering up millions in stolen equipment and unauthorized operations." Frank kept watch while Jack secured the drive. "Thank you," Jack said softly. "You're risking everything for this." Sarah's eyes hardened. "My brother's a Marine. I've seen what these contractors do to good soldiers. Just make it count." They made it off base without incident. But Jack's heart nearly stopped when 2 black SUVs pulled up alongside their van on the highway. Tom's jamming equipment crackled with intercepted communications. "Target vehicle identified. Hold steady," Frank said as Jack gripped the flash drive. "Bill's got this covered." Sure enough, 2 police cruisers appeared, lights flashing. The SUVs peeled away rather than risk attention. Bill's voice crackled over their radio. "Local sheriff owes me a favor. You're clear." Back at Frank's house, they gathered around a laptop, watching the original footage. It showed exactly what Michael had claimed. He'd been trying to stop contractor misconduct, not participate in it. "This is it," Pete said, comparing documents. "With this evidence, plus Sarah's testimony and the forensic analysis of the video editing, it's bulletproof." Jack held the folder containing everything they'd gathered. The flash drive, statements, documents, and analysis reports. His hands trembled, not from age this time, but from the weight of what they held. "SSI will fight back hard," Frank warned, placing a steady hand on Jack's shoulder. "Once we submit this, all hell might break loose." Jack stared at the folder. In his mind, he saw Michael's face, saw Lily's trust, saw the family he'd found so late in life. The evidence in his hands could save them all, or make them targets of some very dangerous people. Tom rolled his wheelchair closer. "We're with you, Jack. Whatever you decide." "All the way," Pete agreed. Bill nodded firmly. Like old times, Frank squeezed Jack's shoulder. "Brothers to the end." The folder seemed to grow heavier in Jack's trembling hands. Everything they'd risked, everything they'd fought for over the decades, came down to this moment and this choice. Jack's heart pounded as he pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the military tribunal. His old bones protested, but adrenaline carried him forward. Behind him, Frank and 3 other veterans marched in formation. Old warriors reunited for one last mission. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The room fell silent. Michael sat at the defense table, his shoulders slumped in defeat. His lawyer looked up, startled by the interruption. At the back of the room, little Lily clutched her aunt's hand, her eyes wide with hope when she spotted Jack. "Your Honor," Jack's voice rang out, stronger than it had been in years. "I have new evidence that demands immediate attention." The judge, Colonel Matthews, peered over his glasses. "Mr. Turner, this is highly irregular. We're about to deliver our final judgment. Then you'll want to see this first." Jack stepped forward, his manila folder clutched tight. Frank moved to his right side, while the other veterans spread out behind him, a wall of solidarity. "This evidence proves that the video used against Lieutenant Carter was doctored." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Michael straightened in his chair, color returning to his face. Jack handed the folder to the bailiff, who passed it to Colonel Matthews. "In that folder, you'll find sworn statements from 3 independent video analysts. They've identified digital manipulation markers consistent with professional editing software." The judge's eyebrows rose as he flipped through the pages. The prosecutor stood up, adjusting his tie nervously. "Your Honor, this is inadmissible at this stage." "There's more," Jack continued, his voice steady. "Mr. Frank Martinez, decorated Navy SEAL, has testimony about the private contractor firm responsible for the forgery." Frank stepped forward, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "Global Security Solutions has a history of covering up their operational mistakes by shifting blame to servicemen. We've uncovered 7 similar cases in the past 5 years." The prosecutor's face went pale. Colonel Matthews studied the documents with increasing intensity. "These allegations are extremely serious, Mr. Turner." "And completely true," another voice called from the back. A man in a crisp suit entered the courtroom. Agent Thompson from the Inspector General's office. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Frank's connections had come through. "We've been building a case against GSS for months. This evidence matches our findings perfectly." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Michael's lawyer frantically reviewed copies of the documents, his eyes growing wider with each page. "Furthermore," Jack continued, pulling out one last piece of paper, "we have a signed confession from James Wilson, the GSS regional director, admitting to the video manipulation. He turned himself in this morning with full documentation of the cover-up." Colonel Matthews removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Lieutenant Carter, please approach the bench." Michael stood on shaky legs. Jack watched him walk forward, seeing not just a young SEAL, but the boy who grew up hearing stories about his father's service, the man who recognized an old tattoo in a diner, the father who only wanted to make his daughter proud. "In light of this new evidence," Colonel Matthews announced, his voice filling the chamber, "and pending full investigation of Global Security Solutions, all charges against Lieutenant Michael Carter are hereby dismissed." The room exploded in cheers. Michael's lawyer pumped his fist in victory. The prosecutor quietly gathered his papers, avoiding everyone's eyes. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the recommendation for dishonorable discharge is immediately rescinded. Lieutenant Carter's service record will reflect the truth, that he acted with honor and distinction throughout his deployment." Lily broke free from her aunt's grip, running down the aisle.
"Daddy! Grandpa Jack!"
Michael scooped her up in his arms, holding her tight. His eyes met Jack's over her shoulder, filled with gratitude and relief. Jack stepped forward and suddenly found himself wrapped in their embrace. Tears rolled down Jack's weathered cheeks as he held them both. He felt Lily's small hands patting his face, wiping away the tears. "Don't cry, Grandpa," she whispered. "You told me to never stop believing, remember?" "I remember, sweetheart," Jack managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I remember." Around them, the old veterans stood at attention, offering silent salutes to their brother in arms. Frank nodded at Jack, a gesture that spoke volumes about loyalty, honor, and the bonds that never break. The morning sun streamed brighter now, warming Jack's shoulders as he held his newfound family. For a man who had felt invisible for so long, he had never felt more seen, more present, more alive than in this moment of triumph and tears. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Jack walked to the diner, his usual spot for breakfast. But today felt different. People who normally hurried past now stopped to greet him. Mrs. Henderson, who owned the flower shop, waved from her storefront. Tom, the mailman, crossed the street just to shake his hand. Inside the diner, conversations hushed as Jack entered, not with the old awkward silence of being ignored, but with a new kind of respect. Sarah, his regular waitress, had tears in her eyes as she approached his table. "Mr. Turner," she said, setting down his usual coffee without him having to order.
We all owe you an apology. The way we treated you and Michael."
Her voice cracked. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. "No need for that, Sarah. You were just—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "We were wrong, plain wrong, and we want to make it right." Throughout breakfast, person after person stopped by his table. Mayor Thompson himself came in, pulling up a chair without invitation. His gray hair was disheveled, his usually pristine suit wrinkled as if he'd been up all night. "Jack," the mayor said, leaning forward, "the town council met early this morning. We want to hold a ceremony. Nothing fancy, we know you're not one for show. But what you did for Michael, standing up against those contractors, risking everything, well, it reminded us what real courage looks like." Jack stared into his coffee cup.
"Just did what needed doing,"
he mumbled. But the mayor wouldn't let it go. By noon, the whole town was buzzing with activity. The Veterans Hall, usually quiet on weekdays, filled with people bringing food, hanging streamers, and setting up chairs. Jack watched from across the street, amazed at how many faces he recognized. Faces that had looked through him just days ago. Michael appeared at his side, Lily's small hand in his. "You can't hide from this one, sir," he said with a grin. "They're determined to thank you properly." Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Grandpa, you have to come. I helped make the banner." Sure enough, a hand-painted banner hung across the entrance. "Thank you, Jack Turner, our town's hero." The letters were wobbly, decorated with glitter and star stickers. Clearly, Lily's handiwork. By early afternoon, it seemed the whole town had packed into the Veterans Hall. Jack sat uncomfortably in a chair at the front, Michael and Lily beside him. The mayor stepped up to a makeshift podium, clearing his throat. "Sometimes," he began, "it takes a crisis to remind us who we really are. This town forgot something important. We forgot how to stand together. We forgot how to see the quiet heroes walking among us." Jack listened as the mayor recounted not just the recent events with Michael, but reached back further, to Jack's service in Vietnam, to the lives he'd saved, to the decades of quiet dignity with which he'd carried himself. Stories Jack thought no one remembered or cared about anymore. One by one, townspeople stood to speak. Mrs. Peterson from the library recalled how Jack had fixed her roof last winter, refusing payment. Officer Rogers remembered how Jack had talked his troubled son through a rough patch, giving the boy purpose and direction. Even old Frank had driven down from the next county, sharing sanitized versions of their SEAL missions that made the children's eyes go wide with wonder. Sarah from the diner brought up a huge cake decorated with an American flag. "On the house," she said with a wink. "Forever." The biggest surprise came when Reverend Williams wheeled in an old projector. The screen flickered to life, showing a video call from Jack's daughter in California. She wiped tears from her eyes as she told him how proud she was, how the story of what he'd done for Michael had made national news. She was flying in next week, she announced, to spend time with her dad and meet her new adopted family. Through it all, Jack sat straight-backed in his chair, fighting the tightness in his throat. Lily had climbed into his lap, her small hand patting his cheek whenever she sensed him getting overwhelmed. Michael stood behind him, a steady presence, one hand on Jack's shoulder. When the mayor finally asked Jack to say a few words, he stood slowly, Lily sliding off his lap. The room fell silent, every eye on him. For once, the attention didn't make him want to disappear. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "Been invisible so long, I got used to it. Thought that's all there was left for me." He paused, looking down at Lily's encouraging smile. "But sometimes life gives you a second chance. Sometimes it sends you people worth fighting for." He turned to Michael. "You and your little girl there, you woke something up in me. Something I thought was long dead. Made me remember what it means to have a family, to have a purpose." Looking out at the gathered faces that now saw him, really saw him, Jack felt decades of loneliness beginning to lift. These weren't just townspeople anymore. They were his community, his people. "Thank you," he said simply, and sat back down. The applause was deafening. People surged forward to shake his hand, pat his back, offer hugs. Lily beamed up at him, proud as any granddaughter could be. Michael stood at attention, offering a crisp salute that other veterans in the room quickly matched. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Jack Turner stood tall, seen and appreciated by all. The weight of invisibility, of being forgotten, lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't just the old veteran who lived alone anymore. He was Jack Turner, father, grandfather, hero, friend. He was home. Jack stood in his bedroom, surrounded by cardboard boxes and memories. Sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air as he carefully wrapped his wife's photograph in soft cloth. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he placed it in a box marked, "Important." "Need any help with that, sir?" Michael's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in jeans and an old t-shirt, ready for moving day. "I'm managing," Jack said, but smiled at the offer. "Though these old bones aren't what they used to be." "Grandpa! Grandpa!" Lily burst into the room, her pigtails bouncing. "I found the perfect spot for your special chair in our living room. Come see." Jack chuckled. "Let me finish packing this box first, sweetheart." He looked around the bedroom that had been his sanctuary for so many years. The walls were bare now, the familiar pictures packed away. It felt strange, but not sad. Instead of emptiness, his heart was full of anticipation. Michael stepped in and picked up a box. "You know, we could have hired movers." "Nonsense," Jack replied, sealing another box with tape. "A Turner handles his own business." "You're really stubborn, you know that?" Michael grinned. "Must be where I get it from." Jack paused, touched by the casual way Michael had claimed him as family. The younger man had been doing that more lately, drawing parallels between them, speaking as if they shared blood. Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Can I carry something small? I want to help too." "Here." Jack handed her a lightweight box of pillows. "Very important cargo. Think you can handle it?" She stood straight and serious. "Yes, sir! Special delivery coming through!" She marched out with exaggerated care, making both men laugh. The moving process took most of the morning. Jack's pickup truck and Michael's SUV made several trips, carrying boxes and furniture across town. With each load, Jack's old house grew emptier, while Michael's home began to feel more and more like their shared space. "This goes here," Lily declared, pointing to a sunny corner in the living room where she'd cleared space for Jack's favorite armchair, the one he'd spent countless evenings in, reading or watching the news. "You sure about that spot?" Jack asked, though he had to admit the natural light was perfect for reading. "It's the best chair spot in the whole house," Lily insisted. "I tested all the corners. This one's special." Michael helped Jack position the chair. "She's right, you know. Best view of the TV, close to the kitchen for coffee runs. And you can keep an eye on everything from here." Jack sank into the familiar cushions, feeling how right it felt in this new space. Lily immediately climbed into his lap, as if christening the spot as their official storytime location. The afternoon passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. They worked together, finding places for Jack's belongings among their own. His coffee mug found a home next to Michael's in the kitchen cabinet. His books filled an empty shelf in the living room. His clothes hung in the closet of what was now his room, formerly Michael's home office, transformed into a comfortable bedroom. "Dad," Michael called from the hallway, then caught himself. The word hung in the air between them, spoken for the first time without thinking. He cleared his throat. Jack, where do you want these photo albums?" Jack's heart swelled at that simple word, Dad. He pretended not to notice Michael's embarrassment, keeping his voice steady. "Top shelf of the bookcase would be fine." As evening approached, delicious smells began wafting from the kitchen. Michael had insisted on cooking a special dinner to celebrate their first night as a proper family. Jack sat in his chair, helping Lily with her homework while the sounds and scents of home filled the air. "Dinner's ready," Michael called out. "Hope you like lasagna. It's my specialty." They gathered around the kitchen table, not Jack's old table or Michael's, but a new one they'd picked out together last week. Steam rose from the pasta, and garlic bread filled a basket in the center. "We need to say grace," Lily announced solemnly. "Grandpa, will you do it?" Jack reached out, taking Lily's small hand in his left and Michael's strong one in his right. He closed his eyes, overcome for a moment by the simple rightness of it all. "Thank you, Lord, for this food," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "And thank you for bringing this family together. Amen." "Amen," Lily echoed cheerfully, already reaching for the garlic bread. The kitchen filled with the sounds of plates clinking, questions about passing the salad, and Lily's excited chatter about her day at school. Jack watched Michael serve generous portions, noticed how he'd remembered Jack's preference for extra cheese, just as Jack noticed he'd automatically poured Michael's water with no ice, just the way he liked it. Laughter bounced off the walls as Lily told a story about her friend's new puppy, complete with animated gestures that nearly knocked over her milk. Michael caught the glass just in time, sharing a knowing look with Jack over her head. Jack sat back, fork paused halfway to his mouth, taking in the scene. The warm yellow light of the kitchen lamp illuminated their faces. Michael's eyes crinkled with laughter at his daughter's antics. Lily's cheeks were flushed with happiness as she bounced in her seat. This was what he'd been missing all those years, not just company, but belonging. Not just a house, but a home. Lily caught him watching and smiled, marinara sauce on her chin. "Isn't this the best, Grandpa? Now you'll be here every day." "Every single day," Jack agreed, reaching over to wipe her chin with a napkin. "And we'll have family dinner every night," Michael added. "Although maybe not lasagna every time." "Can we have ice cream for dessert?" Lily asked hopefully. "I might have picked up your favorite flavor while I was getting groceries," Michael winked. Jack looked at his new family, his heart full to bursting. The empty house he'd left behind didn't matter anymore. This was where he belonged, in this kitchen, with these people, sharing jokes and stories and simple meals made with love. This was the family he was meant to find. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents clutched programs and fidgeted with cameras, while younger siblings squirmed in their seats. Jack Turner sat straight-backed in his chair, his military posture unchanged after all these years. He wore his best blue button-down shirt, and the tie Lily had picked out for him, decorated with tiny yellow stars because, as she'd said, "You're a star, Grandpa." Michael sat beside him, both men scanning the red velvet curtain for any glimpse of Lily. The spring play, The Wizard of Oz, had drawn what seemed like the entire town. Jack recognized faces that months ago had turned away in judgment. Now they offered warm smiles and respectful nods. "She's been practicing her lines nonstop," Michael whispered, pride evident in his voice. "Even in her sleep, I swear." Jack chuckled softly. "Yesterday she made me play the Tin Man while she rehearsed. I've never had to pretend to be so stiff." "That's because you weren't pretending, old man," Michael teased, nudging Jack's shoulder. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. The principal walked onto the stage, welcomed everyone, and introduced the play. Jack's heart swelled with anticipation. He'd never imagined he'd be here, waiting to watch his granddaughter perform, surrounded by family and community instead of sitting alone in his old house. The curtain rose, revealing a cardboard Kansas farmhouse in paper tornado. Children in elaborate costumes shuffled onto stage, and there she was, Lily, dressed as Dorothy, her braids perfectly plaited and red shoes gleaming under the spotlight. She searched the crowd until her eyes found Jack and Michael. Her face lit up with a brilliant smile, and she gave them a tiny wave that wasn't quite in character for Dorothy. Jack raised his hand slightly, returning the wave. He heard several ahs from nearby parents, but he didn't care. Gone were the days of trying to remain invisible. Lily delivered her lines with confidence, her voice clear and strong. "There's no place like home," she declared, and Jack felt those words deep in his soul. He watched her skip down the yellow brick road, making friends with her fellow actors, facing down the wicked witch, and finally finding her way back home. During intermission, Michael went to get them both coffee from the refreshment table. An elderly couple stopped to chat with Jack. "Your granddaughter is wonderful," the woman said warmly. "Such a natural talent," Jack beamed. "Thank you. She's been working very hard." "We've heard what you did for your son-in-law," the husband added, "standing up against those contractors, clearing his name. This town needs more men like you." Jack nodded humbly, still uncomfortable with praise, but learning to accept it. Michael returned with the coffee, and they all chatted until the lights flickered, signaling the second act. The play concluded with thunderous applause. Parents rushed forward with flowers and cameras, creating a cheerful chaos. Lily burst through the crowd, still in her Dorothy costume, and launched herself into Jack's arms. "Grandpa, did you see me? Did you hear all my lines?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Every single one," Jack assured her, holding her close. "You were the best Dorothy I've ever seen. Even better than Judy Garland?" she asked seriously. "Well now, let's not get carried away," Jack teased, making her giggle. A group of Lily's classmates approached, wide-eyed and curious. One little boy pointed at Jack. "Is that really your grandpa? The hero?" Lily stood tall, still holding Jack's hand. "Yes, this is my grandpa, Jack, the bravest man I know." She turned to her friends with pride. "He was a Navy SEAL, and he saved my daddy and lots of other people too." Jack felt tears prick at his eyes as Lily continued telling her friends about him. Not stories of war or violence, but about how he helped her learn to ride a bike, how he made the best pancakes, and how he never broke a promise. More parents gathered around, and Jack found himself shaking hands and accepting thanks. Michael stood nearby, watching with a knowing smile. This was a far cry from the invisible man who used to hide in the corner of the diner. "Time to head home, Princess," Michael finally announced. "Grandpa promised to make his famous spaghetti for dinner, remember?" Lily cheered, still holding Jack's hand. Michael took her other hand, and together they walked toward the exit. The evening air was warm and sweet, with the scent of spring flowers. Their shadows stretched long across the school parking lot, 3 figures linked together. Jack felt the gentle pressure of Lily's small hand in his, the steady presence of Michael beside them. He thought about the word home, how it had once meant an empty house full of memories, and how now it meant family dinners, bedtime stories, morning coffee with Michael, and Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator. They reached the car, but before letting go of their hands, Jack paused. He looked at his daughter's drawing pinned proudly to the school bulletin board as they passed. 3 stick figures holding hands, just like they were now. Below it, in careful second-grade handwriting, she'd written, "My family." In that moment, Jack Turner knew with absolute certainty that he would never be invisible again. He had found his way home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.